So last week we started this class on silence and solitude. The goal has been to help us to better understand the spiritual disciplines, to better understand how we pursue godliness and being Christ-like. And times of silence and solitude are really fundamental to that. One of the things that really, I think, plagues New Testament Christianity, or modern Christianity, I should say, is the lack of silence. We're always busy talking. And sometimes we just need to be quiet and listen. Let's
Amen.
give ourselves time to think and feel and even to be led into the things that the Lord wants for us. Now, Jay Adams had this quote I thought was super appropriate. He says, "The word discipline has disappeared from our minds, our mouths, our pulpits, and our culture. We hardly know what discipline means in modern American society, and yet there's no other way to attain godliness. Discipline is the path to godliness." And I think that's such a powerful quote for us to consider, such a powerful truth. One of the key ways that we can pursue godliness is discipline, and one of the key disciplines is silence. Now, last week we started talking about these biblical reasons for silence and solitude, and we talked about the fact that the first, and in my opinion, the most important reason that we need to pursue silence and solitude is because that's what Jesus did. He spent time in silence. He spent time in solitude for prayer, for reflection. Jesus understood the importance of this, not only for himself, but also for his disciples. And if we're going to truly follow in his footsteps, if we're going to be the people Jesus was, we're going to be like him, then silence and solitude is one of those things that we need to pursue. Now, another important reason that I think we need to consider spending time in silence and solitude is because it can help us avoid the distractions that this world kind of throws at us, especially during prayer. One of the biggest problems I think that faces us today, faces modern Christianity, is this constant barrage of noise, activities, whether it's our phone, a television, social media, video games. We are being constantly surrounded by sounds and things that demand our time and attention, and that diverts our attention from the things that really are important. One of the things that I constantly hear today is how people are always on their phones, and how they're missing out on the time with family and time with their kids because they're always on their phone. On Monday, we drove up to visit with my dad and stepmom, and one of the things I noticed was that 90% of the cars we passed, people were on their phones. They were texting or looking down at their phones or talking on their phones, and not paying attention to what they were doing. Sometimes silence and solitude is what we need because it's so easy in our modern world to be distracted. What do you guys think?
I think it's possible to spend a 24-hour day in our society without thinking any deeper than last night's rain puddle. We can get through an entire day without ever having to challenge ourselves on anything.
Yeah, and we really do need to get to a place where we can fix that kind of stuff. A place where, I don't know, we can have some quiet time to think, to feel, to pray.
Hey, Jeff, I was thinking just a second ago when you was talking about the TV going all the time and everything. Jimmy and I's grandmother, I sat with her one day a week when she got where she needed somebody to sit with her. And growing up, and he'll tell you the same thing, they didn't have the TV on. It didn't come on until maybe news time at nighttime, or it, that was using too much power for one thing. Poppy didn't want to pay no high power bill. But you went there and I sat there 8 hours a day, sitting there across from her. She'd sit on the couch, I'd sit in the chair, and we talked all day long. And if the TV had been on, you wouldn't be doing that. And
Yeah.
it was those times are special that you miss if you're just sitting watching TV.
I think it's one of the things that our younger generation has missed out on is that time spent with parents, but more importantly with grandparents, just listening and being present. As a young person, I didn't always enjoy that time sitting listening to grandparents, but I learned so much from it. And our modern push toward noise and busyness has kind of stolen that from this generation.
Every Sunday after church, I think most of the family would go up there to their house, and they didn't have TV on. It would be like a family reunion every Sunday after church. And they would just sit and talk all day.
Yeah. All of us ought to miss those kinds of times because there was a time in most people's family in our past when families did that. We got together, we spent time together, we talked, we kept those connections alive. But in relation to faith, we spend so much time busy, and not all of it is a bad thing. We got to be fair and we got to be honest about it. Not all of our busyness and noise is a sinful or bad thing. Most of it, and well, some of it is a necessity. And yet we got to be careful that we don't let those things, those distractions, keep us from what's really important, like Bible study, prayer, self-examination, time with family and children and spouses. We need that time to just be quiet, to get rid of those distractions. I think Elijah is a good example of that in 1 Kings 19. If somebody would read 1 Kings 19, verse 8.
So he got up and ate and drank, strengthened by the food. He traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God.
All right, now somebody else read verses 11 through 13.
And he said, Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by. And a great and strong, wild, sorry, y'all. I have a low line here. And a great and strong wild wind rent the mountains and break in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. Oh, I love this, y'all. I love this. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. You want me? What do you say?
Verse 13. Go ahead and read that one too.
And it was so. When Elijah heard it, then he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood in the entering in of the cave. And behold, there came a voice unto him and said, What doest thou here, Elijah?
Thank you, Kathy.
I love this. I've always loved this.
this is a really important story, and a lot of times we kind of miss it. Elijah is running for his life from Jezebel. He is depressed and scared, and God is bringing him to the Mount of God, to Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai, where Moses received the law. And when he gets there, God tells him to go outside and stand. And when he does, God passes by and he demonstrates something really powerful to Elijah. He's not in the wind, he's not in the earthquake, he's not in the fire. It was a small, still voice. And what's so humbling about that is, would it have been easy for Elijah to miss that small, still voice? You see, the thing about this story that I think is so powerful and that we often miss is Elijah had been so busy thinking and feeling and reacting that he hadn't taken the time to listen to God. He hadn't really taken the time to just be quiet and hear what God had to say. And God demonstrated that it wasn't in those big things. It wasn't in those loud things. It was in the silence, that small, still voice, that low whisper, as the English Standard says. That's how God spoke to him. And had Elijah not stopped and stood in silence and waited for God to speak, he would not have heard him. He would have missed out on this. And the thing is that happens to us so much today. We have a whole generation of Christians, maybe 2 or 3 generations of Christians who never really heard, never really felt that connection and God speaking to them in any way, shape, or form. And more often than not, the reason is not their faith, and it is not their inability to hear, and it's not God's inability to speak. It's that they're not being quiet enough to hear it.
I think also a lot of times we're not patient enough. In Psalms 37:7, it tells us to be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Sometimes I think we get too much in a hurry because we're not getting the answer quick enough or whatever it is. But I think if we're a little more patient and take our time a little more,
I couldn't agree more, Pat. I think that's a perfect example. Is, we get so anxious and worried that we do all the talking. I mean, think about how many times that you've spent your entire time in prayer talking, but you've never stopped to listen. I don't know about you, but for me, a conversation involves 2 people. If one person dominates the conversation and does all the talking and the other person doesn't speak, that's not a conversation, that's a lecture. More often than not, we spend our entire time in prayer doing all the talking. And we need to slow down, be patient, give God time to speak, time to act, time to move us towards something. And the modern distractions of our world really hinder that, because it's hard for us to find a place and a time where we can just be quiet enough to even hear God speak in the first place. Somebody read Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 1, and then read verse 4.
I will stand like a guard and watch. I will wait to see what the Lord will say to me. I will wait and learn how he answers my question. Verse 4, this message can't help people that refuse to listen to it, but a good person will believe this message, and the good person will live because of his faith.
Now, what I think so interesting about this is, Habakkuk 2:4 is the quote or the phrase that's used repeatedly in the New Testament, the just shall live by faith. The good person, the righteous person, the just will live by faith. And that truth came to Habakkuk and was written down for us because Habakkuk was busy talking and complaining to God, asking why he wasn't doing something, and then complaining about God's method of doing something, how God was going to do it. And in verse 1, he says, so I decided I'm going to go out and wait and watch. I want to know what God has to say about this. Now, on one hand, there's some arrogance here. He says, I will take my stand at my watchtower, station myself there, and I will look and wait and listen to see what he has to say. I want to know what he has to answer for my complaint. Now, on one hand, there's some pretty serious hubris here, but there's also this understanding that in order to hear what God has to say, he's going to have to stop and listen and be quiet. And one of the truths that I find most powerful about this is Habakkuk doesn't sit back and say, I wonder if God will answer me. I wonder if God will speak, or can he speak? He knows that God can. He believes that with everything he's got. But he also knows that if he's going to hear God, he's going to have to be quiet. Now, guys, that's a truth for the church today, and a truth that really supports this point, that one of the main reasons we need to spend some time in silence and solitude is because it can help us avoid the distractions that are all around us, so that we can pray and so that we can hear what God has to say. In Galatians 1, verse 17, it talks about the fact that Paul spent 3 years in Arabia. We don't know what happened in that time, but what we do know is that following that, Paul was fully prepared for his work as an apostle, his work as a missionary. And it leads me to believe that in that 3 years, Paul spent a whole lot of time listening and being taught, learning what the Lord's will was. Elijah needed that quiet time to hear God. He needed to stop talking. Habakkuk understood that God would speak, but he had to stop talking and wait for it. As Pat said, be patient. Paul, more than likely, and granted that is an assumption, but Paul more than likely spent a whole lot of time listening and learning and being taught. Now, I think an important note to consider here is that it's not always absolutely necessary to get far away from all noise and all people to spend time in quietness and prayer. If that was true, most of us would never get a chance to pray. Yet there are times when that silence and solitude will really help us eliminate all the noise, all the voices of the world, so that we can better hear and commune with the Lord. And it doesn't really matter where you go. What's important is that you have a place to go, to withdraw from the noise and chaos of life, a place that's quiet enough where you can speak with and hear the Lord in a way that is uninterrupted and doesn't have to be competing with all these other things for our attention. Now, you notice on the slide, the very last word is addiction with a question mark. Now, my question is, do you think it's possible for us to have an addiction to noise and busyness?
For sure.
I think that's the American standard right now. No, seriously. It's
It, as I was studying these things and preparing these lessons, I was really struck by, not only in my own life, but in the lives of a lot of the people that I know that struggle with silence. It's one thing to listen to the TV. It's another thing. It's one thing to listen to the TV. It's another thing to listen to music or something while you're studying or doing homework or chores. But honestly, it's another thing entirely to be unable to be in a room without some kind of noise, without something playing music or the television playing.
I think it's really common for most people when they get out of the bed in the morning, unless they, if they stay home, that's the first thing they do is turn the TV on. And instead of spending that first hour or more just being quiet.
Mm.
Yeah, but the news is so good when you do
Mm.
News is not good.
that. It's not even close.
Some people call that like a white noise,
Yeah.
like where you have to have something in the background, no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
And
Like Jeff said, sometimes when the neuropathy pain in my hands and feet gets real bad during the day, I'll turn on a TV or put on some earphones for distraction. But I find that pretty quickly, I'm so tense you couldn't pull a needle out of my arm with a tractor, and it's just the constant input that never stops. Sometimes I'll just get in my car, roll the windows down, turn everything off, and drive, and it's marvelous. One of the best things I've ever done is in the mornings at 106.9 they'll have Bible lessons, and I'll just drive and listen to that. And boy, you can really, really
Yeah.
get into your own head doing that. I mean, you start questioning things and thinking about things that just you should think of all the time and just don't.
yeah.
They make those noise machines to try to put babies to sleep, so they'll be listening to noise.
Yeah. And like Marty said, guys, sometimes, white noise is an important thing. I personally struggle to concentrate at home or in the office because there's so much noise going on from the highway. You wouldn't believe how much you can hear the cars going up and down the road. You wouldn't believe how many times just the sound of dogs barking, cars going up and down the road, all these things are distractions that's really difficult. And one of the things that I found is some soft music playing that just mask all those other sounds will help me think and concentrate. So on one hand,
A helicopter. You
Go
know,
ahead.
my refrigerator, it sounds like a helicopter, and my heat will go. It's like just those are like little things, but that's all I ever hear.
Yeah.
Is that because I do not turn my TV on. When my time is with God, it's with God.
Yeah. And, my thing is, on one hand, we need to recognize the blessing and benefit of technology. We need to recognize the great blessing and benefit of all the things we have available to us today. Especially, the ability to create some white noise to drown out all those other sounds so that we can focus. But on the other hand, we also have to recognize the fact that all that noise can be invasive and distracting, that it can actually keep us from the Lord.
Yeah, the Lord has told me to keep my doors shut and everything, my shades shut and all that with my time with Him. Because once I open my wooden door, you can still hear the traffic outside. But I do open my shade so I can see God's birds and everything.
Yeah. See, It's-
every morning for his nature and everything.
Yeah, see, it's the same way for me is, sometimes, the noise is so loud just outside, whether it be cars, traffic, whatever, that, noise is necessary to just give me a place to concentrate. And yet we also have to recognize that all that stuff can be really distracting.
I have trouble sleeping at night, and sometimes I'm up at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's the perfect time because it's so totally quiet. There's no traffic for you to be able to sit and open your Bible and read then and just concentrate.
Yeah. Because, guys, one of the key things we need to understand about the Christian disciplines, and especially this discipline of silence and solitude, is there's a godly component to it. There's this pursuit of Christ-likeness. And that silence and solitude helps us avoid all the distractions that would normally keep us from Him, especially in our time of prayer, and especially when we're listening for the Lord to speak, whether it be through His Word, through the Spirit, or whatever, so that noise kind of disconnects us and keeps us from Him. So we've got to be aware of that. Any thoughts?
I think it's interesting that the overwhelming majority of people in, Simi Valley, California, that run these big tech companies put extreme limits on phones, any kind of social media on their children. They very rarely get to use them. Yet we use them we've let them enslave us. We've let things and noise and, it's basically leached our souls out at time. We just become switch on, switch off human beings.
Yeah.
And it's damaging. There's a show on Netflix about that, talking about the horrors. I mean, a lot of people who used to be big time dealers in this stuff have left these companies, and they're, and what they're saying is basically what you're saying, is they're distracting from anything that really matters.
Yeah. Absolutely. Anyone else?
Hey, I think Jim kind of alluded to it there, but what I was going to say was that to me, it also comes back to like our discipline as well, because we need to be able to discipline ourselves to be able to put those distractions away, not allow the distractions to get to us. And noise, you can't really stop noise. Noise is everywhere. And to me, it's disciplining yourself to not allow the noise to distract you.
Exactly. Amen.
Is what it comes down to. Because people were mentioning the white noise and stuff. And to me personally, I have to physically, I have to have noise, just for my own sanity as well, because working around jets, my ears have been damaged, and to where the doctors have told me, do you notice when things are quiet, you have ringing in your ears? Yeah, I guess your ears are damaged. And then if you're silence, it messes with your ears, and there's a constant ringing, and to where it kind of doesn't feel good sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like me. I'm a child of the 70s headphones.
Yeah.
So you're not bleeding.
It comes back to our discipline and not allowing the noise to distract us.
I think that's a really good point, Aaron.
Yeah.
Because, like you, sometimes the white noise is the only thing that can get me through so I can concentrate. But we do need to learn to discipline ourselves to push those things aside so that we can focus, that we can get rid of the distractions and be able to listen and hear. Because
Jeff,
ultimately our goal is faith, Christianity, being Christ-like.
if you take an honest look at it, the discipline, if you put the discipline on yourself, you're actually rewarding yourself. Because if you use enough discipline for a decent amount of time, it's pretty well visible to yourself, just how much better things are. You're calmer, your faith's better.
Absolutely.
Relationships with people are better. You know what it's like if you get in a really, really tense, toxic atmosphere. It's who you are or who you want to be really takes a back seat at times. I know you'll find it shocking that Judy and I might ever snap at each other, but but if you're in a really noisy, tense atmosphere, things like that happen, and it's better to get away from them than to court them.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
This is like when God told me to shut my door, keep my door shut, because I always wanted to open my door because it would bring more sunlight in. Even if it was a cloudy day, it'd bring light in. But he told me shut the doors, and keep it all shut because my time is with you right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Once I'd done that, it was just a dramatic transformation. It was just like so wow. I mean, it was so great because it was just me and God, and I couldn't hear nothing outside. I couldn't hear nothing. I don't turn my TV on, and I thought it was wonderful.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Another reason that I think we should consider quiet, silence, and solitude, applying ourselves, being disciplined, is because it's an expression of how we feel. We've almost reached a point where we believe that worship and faith requires words, sounds, actions. Sometimes worship can consist of simply being quiet. Sometimes the most powerful times of worship we will experience are those times when we are simply being quiet and listening to what the Lord has to say.
Man.
Somebody read Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 20.
But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. I like that one. I like that.
Thank you, Marty. I like it too, because that was really Habakkuk's great lesson that he learned was, after he spent all this time complaining and talking to God, after he spent all this time talking, eventually he had to stop and listen. And what he heard and what he learned was God is still on the throne. He's still in his holy temple, and I just need to be quiet and listen. And I think that's such a powerful lesson for us, because sometimes it is the most appropriate expression of how we feel. Have you ever had that moment in time where you were so overwhelmed with emotion that you couldn't speak?
Hard to even think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's more common than the opposite extreme, which is, when you're so overwhelmed with emotion that you want to speak, that you want to say amen or hallelujah. For me, it's much more common to be so overwhelmed with the feelings and emotions that I can't say anything. I just have to simply be quiet.
Man.
And that's why I say, it is this really powerful and profound expression of how we feel. Sometimes as we keep silent before him, the sense of worship and connection can be so profound and so strong that we couldn't speak if we wanted to. Now, somebody read Zephaniah 1, verse 7.
Be silent before the Lord, the sovereign Lord, for the day of the Lord is near. The Lord has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated those he has invited.
Now, on one hand, guys, I want you to get how significant that is when you consider Jesus Christ and the cross. The day of the Lord is near. The day when the Lord will be here is near. And he has prepared his sacrifice and consecrated his guest. He's made everything ready. on one hand, that's a really powerful lesson to learn. But he begins it with, be silent. Just be quiet. Appreciate what the Lord has done. Appreciate his closeness. Appreciate all that he has accomplished for you. And that is such a powerful lesson. Now, in chapter 2, verse 3, he says, seek the Lord, all you humble of the land, who do his just commands, seek righteousness, seek humility, perhaps you may be hidden on the day of the anger of the Lord. And what I think so powerful is he says, seek the Lord. And in the Hebrew, it literally implies get close to the Lord and be quiet. And he says, perhaps you may be hidden on the day of the anger of the Lord. And the implication, and this is how most Jewish rabbis interpreted this passage, was that he's actually saying that silence was the key to being hidden. Now, we know that's true in a very physical sense, right? You can't hide and make a whole lot of noise. But the closer you get to the Lord, the more you feel that connection, the more you're going to be moved to either quietness, solitude, listening, or you might be moved to the exact opposite of that. Now, I want to share with you a story about George Whitefield. Most of you know Whitefield was burned at the stake for translating the Bible into English. But his journals, in his journals, he wrote a lot of the stories of his life, a lot of the things that he considered important. And on May 9th, 1739, he wrote something I think is really appropriate to what we're talking about. He says, God was pleased to pour into my soul a great spirit of supplication and a sense of his free, distinguishing mercies. And it so filled me with love, humility, joy, and holy confusion that I could only at last pour out my heart before him in silence. He says, I was so full that I could not speak. And then he ends that section with the words, oh, the happiness of communion with God. That's what silence can do for us at times. At times it can bring us closer to the Lord than anything else could. Silence can help us express how we really feel, that sense of connection and closeness. Sometimes the best and most satisfying times of worship and prayer will be those times when we've spent that in silence before the Lord, because our hearts and souls are so full that all we can do is be quiet. Now, sometimes you may feel entirely opposite of that. And at other times you may feel so disconnected, so empty that speaking may seem hypocritical. On one hand, you can be so close and so full of the Lord, so filled with his love and presence that you can't speak. But at other times you may feel so disconnected that speaking just seems inappropriate. No matter how you're feeling or what you're feeling, silence can be very appropriate at times and express how you feel. And let me just say that if you're feeling disconnected, if you're feeling this distance from the Lord or this lacking of the presence of God in your life, one of the best ways to get that, to reconnect to the Lord, is by time and quietness and silence before him. Spend time with him, listen to him, reconnect. We can't spend all of our time talking. At times, we've got to simply be quiet and listen, be present. Any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I don't think that it's a mystery that a lot of one of the go-to verses in the Bible for so many people is Psalms 46:10. Where it says, "Be still and know that I am God." And it meant even more to me when I was reading about it, and they said the original Hebrew word is rapha, which doesn't mean be still. It means to purposely release or let go, or I guess even better would be to be willfully weak in front of God. That's your slam on the brakes verse when you're done, when you can't take any more.
Absolutely. As I would contend that even today, the plan of salvation, God's way of saving us, is dependent on that very idea of reaching that point of just saying, I can't do this. I'm totally helpless. And the Lord can fix it. How we feel is directly related to how closely connected we are to him. And sometimes speaking just seems out of place. Sometimes we're so full we can't speak. And sometimes we're so running on empty that it seems inappropriate. Whatever it is, the answer is reconnect, spend time with him, be quiet, so that we can understand who he is and what he wants, so that we can spend that time in prayer and seeking his will. Anyone else? All right, guys, I got a question. It is 20 after. Do you want to move on to the next point, or do you want to wait till next week?
Next week.
I think we could do next week. I think it's been a really good lesson tonight.
Okay.
Next week's good.
Okay. That's what we'll do, guys. We'll take what we've learned tonight, let that sink in a little bit, so that we can learn those things a little bit better. And then next week we'll continue with our lesson, thinking about silence and solitude. Mr. Jim, would you lead us in a closing prayer?
Sure. Bow with me, please. Father, as we come before you this evening for the final time as a group, thank you so much for giving this time. Thank you for this lesson, for the idea that it's okay to be quiet in a world that doesn't understand it, to be with you in a world that doesn't necessarily care about you. Please keep us strong, keep us going in the right direction. Please be with those who need help. Let us do what we can to help them. Let us stay strong and continue to meet like this as often as we need to. In your son's name we ask, amen.